All right. I want to go over some of the things that you should prepare for your first exam. So I don't think it's going to be on all the endocrine system, but well, let me start going through it anyway. So I'm going to break it down and make a bunch of small videos. And of course, this is the whole endocrine system that you see here. And um, so let's talk about hormones. Hormones are just chemicals that effect have an effect on the body. So what these are showing are cells. So this is like the cell right here, and then this thing right here, the brown thing in the middle, is supposed to be the nucleus, right? And then these little dots are supposed to represent the hormone. So all this is showing you the circulating hormones is that the hormones released from the cell and it goes into the blood and it's going to affect a cell somewhere else in your body, right? So um, it's really that simple. And so you might hear of a word exocrine. So there's endocrine and exocrine. Endocrine goes through the blood. Exocrine goes through ducts. By the way, if you're taking notes, I'll stop and I'll say, "Hey, you need to know this for the test," right? So I'll let you know, so you don't have to try to write down everything. Um, so these are local. These are circulating hormones, and this is an example of a local hormone. So local hormones, they affect things really close by, or even the same cell. So an autocrine hormone, the word auto means like self, and crine means to secrete. So I'll give you an example. The heart, the cells of the heart secrete a hormone that works on the heart. I know it's kind of messed up to think of it that way. Like, okay, this cell is making a hormone, and the hormone's going to turn around and affect the same cell that made it. Why can't it just handle its business? I don't know why. But that's a case where the cell makes something and it affects the same cell. More often, cells will make things that affect cells nearby, and so we use the word paracrine, para meaning nearby. Um, so, obviously, if I've written this out here, that means that's something I'd like you to know. Hormones interact with each other. So some hormones can work together to do something. Some hormones work against each other. So insulin, for example, lowers blood sugar. Glucagon is a hormone that does the opposite. It raises blood sugar. So you could say that those are antagonistic hormones. They work against each other. And then permissive. So to give you an example, you make a hormone called prolactin, which makes breast milk. Prolactin, that is not sufficient to actually start producing breast milk. Prolactin is going to need permission of other hormones like oxytocin and estrogen. I mean, you could look at that and say, well, that's synergistic. Oxytocin, prolactin, they work together for milk production. So, I mean, you would have a point there. And then you could say that, well, prolactin by itself is not going to produce milk. You're going to need oxytocin for this thing called a letdown reflex, when you have the milk ejected into the duct. But anyway, what I have written up here is what you should know. So if you know this part, then you're good. Well, let's get to the main thing, and this is what I'm going to just do this short video on, how hormones work. So hormones essentially are chemicals that make things change. You grow hair where you didn't have before, or lose hair where you used to have hair. That's all because of a hormone. But to be specific, how does the hormone make your body change? Well, it affects the cell. It goes to your cell and it makes the cell do something that it used to do, or stop doing something that it was doing before. So, it turns things on in the cell or turns things off in the cell. I mean, you could look at it that way. So that will change the behavior of the cell. You make the cell do something new or stop doing something that it used to do. And there's two ways to do it, and it really depends on the hormone. So as you saw in another lecture, hormones are water soluble or lipid soluble, meaning that they mix with water or they mix with lipids, like fats, oils, right? So some hormones are fat soluble in your body. Steroids are fat soluble. Thyroid hormones, the hormones that regulate your metabolism, they're fat soluble. They're lipid soluble, right? And a lot of the others are water soluble. But if you think of things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they're all lipid soluble, right? So they don't just go in the blood. And they work differently than other hormones that are water soluble. So this photo right here, this slide right here is talking about lipid soluble hormones, right? And so this is a little bit easier of a process. And really all that's going on here is that the hormones going into the cell, so the hormones like the green part, right? It's going into the cell, it's going into the DNA, into the nucleus, and it's turning genes on and off in your DNA. So you've got these genes, you've got the ability to do something or to stop doing something, right? And it's just about how do you flip that switch inside of your DNA. And so that's what lipid soluble hormones do. So if you look at this membrane around the cell, that's made from a phospholipid. That's made from like a lipid, right? And so because this hormone's also kind of lipid soluble, it's able to go through and go into the cell. So in short, this one's easy. Lipid soluble hormones go into the cell, go into the nucleus, and turn genes off or on. Or in other words, right here at number 2, alters gene expression. That's what that is. You flip genes on and flip genes off. And by doing that, by turning genes on and off in your DNA, you're going to make different proteins or stop making proteins. And proteins are you. Why are you tall or short? Why are you going to get diabetes or not get diabetes, or have curly hair or straight hair? Well, you say, well, that's because of your genetics. Yeah, but it's because of proteins. Proteins, that's the answer to why you look and you are the way you are, right? And the code for proteins is in the DNA. So by messing with the DNA, you change the proteins. And by changing the proteins, you change what the cell is. This one here, the one that sucks, is water-soluble hormones. Now, water-soluble hormones cannot enter the cell. So here's the hormone, like these 3 dots. And you notice here that these 3 dots don't actually ever make it into the cell because this wall, this membrane, it's actually membrane, it's made from lipids. This hormone's water. Water can't pass through oil, right? So it's water can't go through the lipid soluble membrane. So it's a chain reaction. And probably the best way to handle this, because you do need to know this for the quiz, the best way to handle it is just to kind of write it down and make it simple. So I would write for number 1, hormone binds to receptor. Number 2, well, I know this is numbered here, so let me just not number it. Hormone binds to receptor. Next, receptor activates G protein. So see that G protein is right on the other side, right on the inside of the cell. So hormone activates receptor. Receptor activates G protein. It's a chain reaction. G protein activates adenylate cyclase. That's an enzyme. How do I know it's an enzyme? Because it ends with ASE. Therefore, that's a dead giveaway that it's an enzyme. So this enzyme, adenylate cyclase, turns ATP. If you remember, that's like an energy source. It turns it into something called cyclic AMP, or you could just call it CAMP. So there's a chain reaction. Hormone activates receptor, receptor activates G protein, G protein activates adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase makes CAMP. CAMP converts CAMP takes activates protein kinases, which are another enzyme. And so you have these protein kinases in you, these enzymes in you, but they're not activated. They won't get activated until CAMP activates it. CAMP won't do that until it's made. And it can't, so you see, it's like that chain reaction, right? So protein kinases are going to phosphorylate other enzymes. So phosphorylate means give energy to other enzymes. What other enzymes? That depends, right? So, for example, if it's a hair follicle, there's enzymes that are going to cause you to grow hair. Or if somebody's balding, there's enzymes that are going to cause you to lose hair, right? Everything's controlled by an enzyme, right? Enzymes speed up reactions. Everything that your body does has an enzyme that speeds up that reaction. In reality, an enzyme makes it possible because enzymes speed reactions up so fast that without enzymes, those reactions wouldn't happen. So if I want to grow hair, I need an enzyme. If I'm going to lose hair, there's an enzyme for that too. There's an enzyme for every single thing I do. So let me go through this again. So the difference here in this slide, the ultimate difference, like at the end of it all, enzymes are going to change the behavior of the cell by starting enzymes, by getting enzymes going, or by stopping enzymes. I could change what a cell does. So this is different than the last cell. Here, you've turned DNA on and off. You've changed genetic expression. This, you've changed the enzymes. You've started an enzyme, and the enzyme will cause the cell to behave differently. This one's quite easy. The hormone goes in, it goes into the DNA, into the nucleus, it alters the DNA, it changes genetic expression. This one, it's a process. Hormone activates receptor, receptor activates G protein activates this enzyme adenylate cyclase, which turns ATP into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP activates protein kinases. Protein kinases give energy to, phosphorylate, give energy to other enzymes. The enzyme to grow hair, the enzyme to break down food, the enzyme to whatever it is that your body's going to do. So that's the most common. There's different pathways, but this one right here that you're looking at is the most common pathway for water-soluble hormones. So I know that's kind of a pain, and the best way to tackle that is just to kind of memorize the steps. You don't have to memorize the wording here. Just simplify it so that you understand it. And that's how water-soluble hormones work. This is how lipid-soluble hormones work. That's one question. So I could say, describe the actions of lipid-soluble versus water-soluble hormones. And you would explain both of these. That's a complex, heavy-hitting question, I know, especially for your first quiz. You know, this is one of the pain-in-the-ass questions, I admit. This one's an easier one because it's right there in front of you. Hormone interactions, how they interact with each other. You just kind of write down what I have written here. And I don't think I'm going to ask you about this. That's it. There's one possible quiz question. Here's another very possible quiz question. And so I'm going to not get into that. I'm going to stop it there and end the video, and then I will move on in another video.